Hello, today we're going to summarize the material that we've been reading in the Vonderwall book, and also reflect back on some of the ideas that we discussed in Why Nations Fail, and how those ideas also resonate in the work of Vonderwall. First of all, I want to make sure that you understand a number of these key terms. These are terms which have shown up in this book and also in Why Nations Fail. And I want you to make sure that you research these terms and that you're able to at least provide a basic description of what they are, because they are at the root of this discussion. So we have aid dependency, foreign direct investment, what Professor Paul Collier calls agencies of restraint, clientelism, aid conditionality, illiberal democracy, neo-patrimonialism, presidentialism, sorry there's a typo there, partial reform syndrome, rent-seeking, and structural adjustment programs. I'm not going to go over each one of these now, but I suggest you look back in the reading and be able to address these. So, what have we learned so far? Well, basically that when we talk about the fate of nations, or the state of nations, we can't do so without understanding this notion of political economy, namely how political actors influence and promote economic opportunities or economic interests. And we've seen, various ways that political actors can dominate economic factors, and also how they can distort economic growth. In terms of improving the political economy of any nation, we also understand that the quality of its institutions is the key success factor. These include the executive, the legislative, judicial branches of government, as well as the overall bureaucracy in general. Governments are improved by the actions and pressure brought about by civil society organizations and other external actors, but these aren't sufficient on their own. There has to be a will on the part of the government, on the internal mechanism, the decision making and the incentive structures of governments. There has to be a will to change these in order to really make progress. And in fact, external actors can often make the situation worse. And lastly, democratization, which is promoted by many as a panacea, is in and of itself no remedy for economic reform and the overall improvement of social conditions. But we can say generally that it's a good start. So according to Vonderwall, there were a number of major disappointments that occurred in African political economy development after the post-colonial era, and the two major ones that he points out are that people thought that Africa would experience rapid industrialization simply due to the value of its natural resources. At the time in the 1960s, all of the natural resources that Africa had, things like iron ore, copper, gold, these were all at historically high prices. However, there was a major downward trend in the global prices for these commodities during the 70s and 80s, which caused the economies of these countries to contract rather than expand, and that led to corruption and a lot of the social problems that we see today. There was also this belief that this first generation of African leaders, many of whom were, really outstanding individuals, with tremendous ideas on how they were going to lead their countries. There was a belief that these men would be able to overcome, the challenges of these post-colonial governments, but really everyone underestimated the sheer undercapacity of these governments to manage modern economies, as well as to withstand the geopolitical pressures which existed in the world at that time. Things like the Cold War, for instance, which basically had the superpowers manipulating a lot of the political economy of African states. So basically, Van der Walle leaves us with 6 points to ponder with respect to to this notions of partial reform, which he talks about, and these are that African states have used their state power to protect their elites more than other groups in the state apparatus, and certainly more than the general population. That donor aid, even aid which has a lot of strings attached to it, has often had very little effect on promoting reform, and in some cases it has reinforced entrenched interests, some of which were actually detrimental to development. Presidential power, so-called presidentialism, has had a tendency to resist power sharing, and this has helped in some stabilization efforts. Particularly when donors were involved, donors appreciated the ability of authoritarian leaders to get things done, to stabilize the country, but that didn't necessarily result in overall reform adjustments over time. Fourth point is that state capacity is not strengthened. State capacity means the ability of a state, the ability of a government to get things done, has not strengthened over time, and in some cases has weakened further. The neo-patrimonial dimension of African political economies has also weakened accountability and transparency, which again hides corruption and makes the work of reformers very difficult. Governments, in many cases, have simply withdrawn from many key social sectors, education, healthcare, things which affect general rural populations, and they've allowed local and foreign NGOs to step in as a replacement and to provide services which the government should really be replacing. And lastly, democratization has not resulted in a more long-term power sharing situation, although over time, as Van der Walle pointed out, it might. As far as where Africa is going in the 21st century, okay, this book that we just read sort of left off at the doorway to the 21st century, and there are things which have happened over the last 15 years which certainly have changed the situation. One can't say that there's been fantastic progress, although if the amount of foreign direct investment is an indicator of progress, then Africa is certainly making progress along that dimension, although it's unclear on what how the benefits of that foreign direct investment are being distributed to to the general problems of poverty alleviation and infrastructure development. But in any case, increased urbanization throughout Africa will likely lead to political reform as urban groups are in more direct contact with the government, and they will acquire more economic clout than rural dwellers. Formerly corrupt rent-seeking politicians tend to want to become legitimate business people once they've amassed their own fortunes for themselves and their families. And this might lead to some reform, if only to prevent others from stealing as much as they did. That's a little cynical, but there are documented cases of where this is happening. And the continuation of and expansion of multi-party elections, an independent media, and a robust NGO sector may also lead to real political openings. And we can see that that this is happening throughout the continent, and hopefully these are signs that that real change is finally on the way. So in conclusion, along with van der Walle, we can characterize the this period of African history since the 1980s as being in a reform mode, which continues to this day, because these problems of massive poverty still exist. That the methods and results that we've seen have been very mixed, but we can say a few ideas have withstood the test of time, and are basically things that rulers generally agree upon. One is that the state should retreat from being a direct economic actor. In other words, that these state assets, state companies, state-run farms, more what we would call the socialist model, should be privatized, because private business interests, even if they're controlled by elites, tend to be more efficient than the state in running these things, particularly in states that have very low capacity, as we know is the case in many African states. Democracy is not perfect, but it has demonstrated as much, if not more, value creation opportunities than its alternatives. So 10 states which are trending or tending towards democracy also seem to have an improved economic situation, although it's not a one-for-one comparison. And that small democratic pockets in a country, even tiny ones, sprouts of democracy, can have a large effect on the whole. We see that even in China, where small pockets of democracy are changing and influencing political behavior. And that if you have one democracy in a region of the world, it can affect the rest. And perhaps that was part of the motivation behind our invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, or certainly in the case of Iraq, where it was hoped that a vibrant democracy in Iraq would influence the autocratic rule in other parts of the region, but that is yet to proven to be the case. And lastly, I think it's obvious we can say that there are no silver bullets here, and there are no certainties, on the road ahead, simply because we have new challenges and opportunities that are always emerging. We have a new generation of leaders emerging in Africa. Africa is the youngest continent on the planet. We have this massive demographic shift going on, massive urbanization. And we also have big new actors such as China, number one. That's whose influence and behavior in Africa is also going to have a major effect on Africa's political economy going forward. So I hope that you've enjoyed the van der Walle book. He certainly gives us a lot to think about. Thanks.